Daniela, ¿estás ahí? Hola, buenas tardes. ¿Me escuchan?
Sí, sí te escuchamos.
Ah, ok, perfecto. Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes a todos. Vamos a dar unos 2 minutos a que la gente se termine de unir. Just 2 minutes.
Está bien.
Ok. ¿Les parece si empezamos? ¿Están listos? Bueno, quiero presentarme yo. Mi nombre es Bill Suárez, de Latino Commission on AIDS. Y quiero pasarle también a presentar a Pau, el intérprete de esta tarde.
Hola a todos, hi everyone, I'm Pau, soy Pau. Voy a compartir este mensaje en español y después en inglés. I'm going to be sharing this message in Spanish and then in English. Soy Pau, uso los pronombres ella, ellis y soy trabajadora de justicia del lenguaje con el colectivo Babilla. Somos un colectivo transfeminista, antirracista de justicia del lenguaje y estaré interpretando este evento simultáneamente del inglés al español y de español al inglés. I'm Pau, I use they, them pronouns. I am a language justice worker with Babilla Collective, a trans feminist anti-racist language justice collective, and I will be simultaneously interpreting today's event from English to Spanish and from Spanish to English. Y en un momento van a ver una notificación en la derecha al fondo de su pantalla con un icono de un globo que dirá interpretación. Ahí pueden escoger escuchar la interpretación al inglés o al español. También va a haber una opción de silenciar el audio original y solo escuchar al intérprete. Como colectivo transfeminista vamos a interpretar usando lenguaje inclusivo, un recordatorio de hablar a un paso moderado a su capacidad, y si en algún momento están hablando muy rápido, le vamos a pedir por el chat que hablen más despacio o le haremos esta seña de hablar más despacio. Se pueden comunicar conmigo por el chat si tienen algún problema. In a moment, you will see a notification on the right bottom hand corner of your screen that's going to be a globe icon, and it's going to say interpretation. And there you can choose to hear interpretation to Spanish or to English. You also have the option to silencing the original audio and only hearing the interpreter. As a trans feminist collective, just a reminder, we were going to be interpreting using inclusive language, and please speak at a moderate pace at your capacity. If you're speaking too quickly or too low at any point, we will let you know through the chat or by doing this sign to slow down. And you can let me know if you have any issues through the chat. Have a wonderful event, que tengan buen evento, y la interpretación comenzará ahora. Interpretation will begin now.
Muchas gracias, Pau. Bueno, para empezar nuestra actividad esta semana, vamos a hablar sobre el tema
to
que es...
start our conversation,
Vamos a
today we're going to be talking about the
Vidal,
theme protect. We have Misty
Mateo
Vidal,
Guerrero,
Elizabeth
que
Chavez, y
ellos vayan
Mateo
a presentar.
Guerrero. I'm
Empezando
going to
por
let them
Mateo.
introduce themselves, starting with Mateo.
Bueno, buenas noches a todos. Mi nombre es Mateo.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mateo. I use pronouns him and they, them. It's an honor to be with all of you, to have a conversation of what it means to protect our trans communities. Historically, our trans communities have received a lot of violence, and we've been creating lots of different projects. So as a community, to learn how we can protect each other, not only from the violence that exists within our communities.
Con Elizabeth y con Misty.
So I'm happy to be here with Misty and Elizabeth and with all of you here.
Muchas gracias, Mateo.
Thank you so much, Mateo. And we're going to now pass it on to Misty.
Hi, Hey everyone, my name is Misty Vidal. I am a medical transition specialist consultant. I currently work for Community Healthcare Network, and I'm pretty much the go-to person to help people navigate through this crazy thing called healthcare.
Thank you. And our next one is Elizabeth Chavez. Si podía presentarse, por favor.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Elizabeth Chávez. Soy una mujer transgénero, soy mexicana. Y pues bueno, yo he
Hi, good
colaborado
afternoon. I'm Elizabeth Chavez. I am a Mexican transgender woman. I've been collaborating with different organizations around this theme, that is what it means to be safe for all of us. Currently, I am working in
Cultural
with
Transgrediendo, una
Colectivo
organización
Intercultural Transgrediendo organization that's based in Queens, that was created by our dear Lorena Borjas. And since then, we've been working with our community to help our community and to support our trans sisters, and specifically during these hard times that we're living throughout this year.
Gracias, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And
Vamos
to give a little bit of
discusión de
guide, we're
40
going to be having a conversation of 40 minutes. And at the end, we're going to be
promocionar a
presenting
servicios de agencia.
different events and different services. We're going to start with the first question if everyone.
Primera pregunta en el tema de proteger.
First question has to do with protecting
Vamos a
ourselves
hablar. ¿Cómo defines un
or
espacio seguro
protection. How do you
poblacional
define a safe
diverso?
space
Para esta
in
primera
the
vamos
populations
a
of gender diversity? And then this first round, we're going to start with Mateo.
que te sientas más cómodo que traductor. Hay un intérprete.
Whatever you feel more comfortable with, because there's an interpreter.
Ujú.
Okay, so let's talk in Spanish.
Sobre
Okay, so when I
seguros
think
son espacios
about
donde nuestras
safe
comunidades
spaces, these are spaces
pueden
in
ser
which our
todas sus
trans
identidades
communities
en el mismo
can
tiempo.
be all of their identities at the same time, at the same moment, without fearing to be harassed or feeling violent, experiencing violence. And so there are different ways in which to think about protection. And this is something that I'm constantly thinking about, how we create safe spaces for our trans communities, changing the structures of the government, the laws that for so long have criminalized in an unjust ways and really had create violence against our communities. And then so we're thinking about how we can think of the safe spaces for our gender non-binary, queer, and trans community, making sure that we can get rid of 247 penal code that says that the police has discretion to arrest someone who is out in the street with the intention of prostitution. That's what the statute says. And we know that the reality is that the police is using this penal code just to harass these communities for existing in public. The police is using these things like the way their attire, their heels, how they go out in the street in order to criminalize trans women. And that is a form of lack of security that not only lets the police be violent with the criminal justice system against our trans family, but it also says that the trans community can't express their gender identity because the system is so transphobic that even the police is protected from acting that way towards our community. So when we're thinking about safe spaces for our community and what's safe for our trans community is making sure that we change the governmental structures. For instance, the Penal Code 247, that we can make sure to pass laws that not only support the transition, the medical transition of the trans community, but that also supports other treatment, mental health, physical health, or have a health support system that can help our communities. One of the projects that we've been working for a long time is making sure that Elmer's Hospital has a person that identifies as either gender nonconforming or trans that can support our community, our transgender and queer communities, to navigate the health systems in a hospital that's within our communities. where there are so many trans and queer people in the neighborhood of Jackson Heights, and also to repeat these pilot programs in other hospitals in New York City that don't exist. And that's where I'll stop for now to give other panelists an opportunity. Thank you so much. I know that sometimes when you're really passionate about something, it's harder to slow down.
For me, a safe space for me would be trans-owned, trans-operated. And when I say that, that means the CEO, the person who runs the company, a trans person, the employees, trans people. If we can't do that, then I'd rather come into a space where I can see visually or know that at some point they've dealt with my kind before, whether it be a photograph with trans people on it or the language on the registration form where you have your preferred pronouns, your preferred name, places like that. That's what would actually make me, that's what I consider a safe space.
Elizabeth, well, yes. For me, when I think of safe spaces for a trans person, I think of from their childhood. I see myself 5, 10 years old, 15 years old, knowing that the cause of suicide, the highest rate of suicides are the in the trans communities because they're bullied and they're harassed in their schools from an early age. A lot of trans people are scared, or they fear to be who they want to be. I identify a lot with that because yes, it's happened to me in my jobs. I'm an immigrant woman for a long time that was undocumented here in the United States, and it hasn't been easy for me as a trans woman to to impose, and I say impose because that's what we use, impose myself onto society, that I'm respected and that they have at least a minimum tolerance towards my existence. A safe space for me starts from my childhood and education, and we need schools to change the educational system, to change, as Mateo said, um, that they have this type of navigators within their hospitals where for women, transgender folks feel discriminated against, and we don't receive healthcare because of that same fear, that they use the wrong pronoun, that they ask us uncomfortable questions even after we tell them that we are trans folks. Before, I didn't have the security that I have now. Right now, when I go to a hospital and I tell them I'm trans, and they repeat the question again, do you have children? When your last menstruation, your period? When they ask me if I've gotten checks that are supposedly for cisgender women, I don't get upset, but I tell them with respect that I told you I am a transgender woman. So we need to educate society more. We need to educate these spaces more, so they advance, right? Because at the moment, I think that we have made a lot of advances, like in the state of New York, but there are a lot of other states in the U.S. that, because they don't have the same laws, and Mateo can tell us a little bit more about that, but there's a lot of other states that don't even have a law in place against discrimination towards trans women, and or even in the LGBTQ community. And here in New York City, in New York, we've made a lot of progress, but there's still so much more to do. We need the police to stop harassing us. We need that in businesses they stop discriminating against us, that they respect in our employment, in our work, in our job. I'm still scared to go apply at a job and say that I'm trans, because I feel that fear that they're not going to give me that position. And if they give me that position, I feel like I'm going to be harassed. I'm going to be what it could be from my boss, from other employees, or even from clients. So we really need to do a lot of work around visibility for the trans community. So trans children don't take their own lives, so we can be free even more during the week of trans awareness. And even more now that we have the Trans Day of Remembrance, that unfortunately we're gonna be remembering more than 30 people, more than 30 trans people who have been brutally murdered here in the US and in Puerto Rico, without counting Central America and Mexico. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Thank you for all the points that you made are really valid and really and very, very, very real in healthcare system, in different centers. And what second question, I want to remind folks that we have a Q&A section at the end, and we're going to be answering those questions. The second question is, what can people do? What can cisgender people do so trans folks feel more safe in public spaces? And we're going to start with Misty.
I feel like they should, I want to say, be more inclusive to us, like include us in things, as compared to just assuming when we come into a space, like, oh, okay, well, I think this is a boy, so I'm going to say he. Piggybacking off of the first question, like, ask people their pronouns. Don't make us feel different or treat us as other, treat us as one. We all human beings first.
So the way that I think about the engagement of cis people in the movement is in 3 different levels. So in the internalized piece, so someone who identifies as cisgender, the first part of this all is being in constant reflection about what are the ways in which they are perpetuating transphobia. Because someone who identifies as cisgender, they have had a privilege in their life in which they continue to identify with the same gender that they, have been identifying since they were born. And so that privilege oftentimes blinds them from the ways that they behave towards other TGNC communities. And so first of all is that piece of constant reflection. What am I doing that is perpetuating transphobia? What are some of the ways that I can do better? The next level is in terms of the interpersonal interactions, right? Am I actually interrupting moments of transphobia when I'm in that space? Am I directly saying, hey, that's a transphobic joke, you should not be doing that? Am I saying, actually, that was transphobic that you decided not to hire this person? Actually, I know you're my mom or my dad or my cousin, but this was transphobic and you're not supposed to be treating people this way, right? Like, what am I actively doing in those interpersonal interactions to stop transphobia? And not only do that, but also educate, right? Like the first step is, yes, interrupt, but the next step is educate how that moment is a moment that perpetuates transphobia, because that is the only way that people are gonna understand and start to reflect in the future. And also we will be able to create a cultural shift and a cultural change in how we understand transphobia. And then the next level is the kind of like the institutional level. How are you actually plugging in the struggle for the liberation of trans communities? Not just by making a post online, but actually going and being in the front lines with trans people, right? Like, are you actually putting yourself between the police and trans people when there is an interaction? Like, what are you doing to change the laws of this country, the laws of your state, to make sure that the trans and gender non-conforming and non-binary communities and gender expansive communities are protected? So for me, it's like thinking about those 3 levels, the internalized, the interpersonal, and the institutionalized level, to see how can people not only be allies to the movement, but actually comrades to the liberation of and gender expansive communities.
Thank you, Mateo. Y Elizabeth?
Bueno, yo...
well, for me, I want to stay in the same point on creating awareness and education, we need to continue creating campaign to create awareness around the trans community in order for one day in the future, our fight is not just for respect or for tolerance. Continuing to educate employment, in your employment, in the educational centers, that us, so it can be ourselves, that we continue that conversation to create awareness and consciousness, not only for society or the cisgender community, so they respect our pronouns. We don't want to impose respect, but we want to at least reach their hearts in a way that is different, using our stories, using our narratives, our life narratives. During throughout the years, like Mateo said, we've felt a lot of harm, and we've been denied a lot of opportunities, and all of that has to do with the lack of, or the bad education. And what I would like to say, in and I want to make a very specific point, more than anything, in our Latina community, where being transgender is bad, where not being a woman, or not identifying as a woman, or a cis woman or man is bad, where being part of another group or another identity is bad. We need to stop with those stigmas, with those myths, with those taboos. We need to stop with that internalized transphobia that exists. I want to say something quickly, from one of my experiences. I work in the food industry, in cafes and restaurants, where I have the opportunity to train my work team, my work group. And before, I didn't see I didn't see saying sir or ma'am as a bad thing. When a client came and used to offer services, I would be like, "Hi sir, hi ma'am, how can I help you?" Now, in my work, I'm training to not say sir and ma'am, to not use any specific gender, because you don't know how this person identifies. Even though a person might doesn't dress as as what you think is a woman, or don't identify doesn't identify as a woman, being named something, name something they don't identify with, is traumatic. So in my current work, I'm training that way. We don't use gender. We don't we don't say hello specifically using a gender. It's neutral. And also, stop with the myths of the the ideas of the romantic relationships that are exist with trans women, because a lot of the time we suffer for so much discrimination that we can't be happy in our romantic and loving relationships. And that's something I want to bring. These myths of it's bad to go out or fall in love with a transgender woman, and it doesn't have to be that way. We need to stop with those myths. We need to end those myths. And what else? Well, no, just continuing with those campaign, not only during the Transgender Awareness Week, but throughout the entire year, every year, all the time, continuing with those campaign. Social media has a lot of power in this moment. Not only staying in social media, going out on the street, that we're all unite to stop with these myths that being transgender is bad, that being transgender is a sin for folks that are religious, and that a transgender woman doesn't deserve opportunities in this life. We need to stop with that and end that. And in order to do that, we need our cis allies, and we need to be leaders of our own fight and control our own life narrative. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and I'm completely in agreement with you, and I see that the majority of folks are. And Mateo, if you want to add anything, I'm I'm gonna do it in Spanish. I'm gonna be going back and forth. But there's three things that I want to ask folks who identify as cisgender within this panel, or the folks who are participating today. First is that every single day, ask yourselves, what am I doing to support the liberation of trans communities today? And every day you ask yourselves that, because every day there's an action that you can take. 2, to normalize, present yourself, to introduce yourselves with your pronouns. That work of working the pronouns is not just not falls on trans folks. If you have a gender as a cis person, it is your duty to normalize, introduce yourselves with pronouns. And the last thing is, cisgender people have access to work and jobs much more easily than we do. So if you're in a position, in a leadership position, or even or anywhere with any kind of influence, make sure that you put pressure in your workplace to employ more trans people. You all, as cisgender people, have the key to let us to let our community, our trans community in, especially for employment purposes, and help train us. Because a lot of trans people might have not had access to education or gone to school, might have not been to university, and it's because this transphobia in the system perpetuated this. So you as a cis person, how are you supporting that trans person from receiving that training and have an entrance into that to that employment? Thank you, Mateo. I also want to go back to Elizabeth, that Elizabeth mentioned something really important that is going to take us to our third question, which is the internalized transphobia. So I want to ask you all, how does one manage the internalized transphobia? Elizabeth, how do you manage or deal with internalized transphobia? Well, my perspective or my point of view, like Mateo said, if we continue, if we follow those 3 steps, we can stop not only transphobia, but internalize transphobia as well. To be able to accept that we might be different, that we are a diverse community, that there's not black, there's white, there's a huge range of colors within our community. And more than anything, create awareness within the community that to understand that we're here, that we exist, that we deserve an opportunity in life, that we're not asking anything more than respect and tolerance. We are people that we deserve to live, as I always say, in a world that without transphobia, in a world where respect as human beings, because we are capable beings and we just need for folks to open the doors, and we do everything else. We are people that are so capable that we're just there waiting for an opportunity. And we need to stop with these myths. We need to stop with these taboos that affect the trans community, that we're seen as human beings, that independently of gender or of your sexual preference, that we're seen as the human being, the capable human beings that we are. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Misty, you want to add anything?
She pretty much, Elizabeth pretty much said everything that I wanted to say, but it's true. Like, we need to realize you're not going to look like this person. Stop trying to compare yourself to that person. We all just need to be one. We have to deal with cis people already on the outside against us. So it's bad to come to your own kind and, oh, this person is throwing shade, or you can't hang out with that person because you don't have this done. It's like we're all human beings first, and we all need to stick together.
Well, I think that internalized transphobia comes from the ideologies of binary, right? That we had that the woman and the man exist. This idea that comes from colonization, and that for so long they've put it in our minds because of the formation, the way that we're socialized by our families, by our workplace, etc. So we understand, we have to understand, or at least get rid of these ideas of the binary in that form. Within my transition, I would see it as 2 pillars, as women or men, because that's what is created, right? These 2 ideas, and it traps us and keeps us within these 2 categories that we're not able to get out of. So by not being able to reach the goal of looking stereotypically like one or the other, we make it hard for ourselves. And a way to combat the internalized transphobia is redefine what it means to transition. To say my transition, maybe I don't want to use hormones, it doesn't matter. Maybe I don't want to get surgeries, or maybe I do want to get surgery and I don't want hormones. But you can define your own transition, and you have the power in order to fight against that internalized transphobia. And also understanding that gender is very fluid. Our gender changes day to day. One day maybe I feel more masculine, one day I feel more feminine, and accepting that my body is like water. Every day it takes, oh, I forgot the word. Every day it takes like a different form, basically. And it's accepting that reality. And that takes a lot of practice, a lot of self-love, and it also it it requires a cultural and social change that supports me and sees me how I am. And part of that, in addition to that change, we also need more mental health opportunities for our trans communities in order to have that support and in order to have those conversations. Thank you so much, Mateo. I think the next question, we're going to leave it in the air, and whoever wants to respond can go ahead. And then, so the next question is, how can organizations be more intentional to motivate trans communities while folks are healing from the hurt from classism and racism? Who wants to answer that one first? Don't a- don't make me pick. Okay, we can start with Elizabeth if it's not an issue. Can you please repeat the question? Of course. So the question is the following. How can organizations be more intentional and to motivate the experiences of trans folks while trans folks are healing from the hurt of racism and classism? I think this question refers to organizations that aren't LGBTQ, because organizations that are LGBTQ and trans women organizations are little by little trying to do their part, even though there's a lot still to do. Um, Definitely organizations that are even called that work on LGBTQ issues need to have specific programs for trans women. In my experience, I've been and I've referred sisters to organizations that are LGBT, but they don't offer any services for trans women. And then from my point of view, how can you call yourselves LGBT organizations and not and you don't do anything for the trans community? And then so where do you stand as an organization? Organizations that are not LGBT need to include us. They need to include us regardless of they need to include us as human beings and have services for us and offer services to the communities. And then there's still a lot of work to do, and also creating awareness and consciousness on how to include, how to treat, and how to work with LGBTQ communities, specifically trans women's. Now that trans women and trans men are the people who suffer the most. um, we suffer the most from the lack of information. For instance, when it comes to pronouns, when it comes to questions that all of a sudden can have that impact on that trans community, on trans men and trans women. So yeah, organizations have to be more inclusive. They need to expand their services to trans communities. And in that way, in the future, we're going to be able to create more visibility, to create more progress. And I repeat it, in the future, maybe we won't have to be fighting for our freedom and for our respect and for our rights. And we can be human beings like everyone else, living in a free world happily. Thank you so much. Misty?
Again, Elizabeth B., I think we're sharing a brain here. But I agree with her. It's more about inclusive, being more inclusive. Hire us. Have us on your decision-making boards, like, so we can do constant trainings about trans sensitivity, cultural competency. I know if I go into a space, I like to see somebody that looks like me or that I can relate to, as compared to somebody else trying to tell me, but you can't live my experience. So hire us. Let's start doing more research on surgeries. Like, how we need to proper care for each other after, things like that.
Hire a consultant that identifies as trans, as non-binary, as gender non-expansive. Hire them and ask them, how can I make sure that my organization has practices that are inclusive for everyone, every gender, right? And I am saying hire them because, one, you're creating a job opportunity. And there are so many of us out there that are doing consultant work. And I'm thinking even like Cecilia or like Chad, like so many folks that are identified as trans who are doing this type of work. So hire them, right? And then making sure that your HR practices are aligned with how do folks identify, right? Like if you, for tax related purposes, you have to give like the legal name, well, then don't show that to other staff. Like, how are you actually going to reflect the person's name, and how are you supporting that person to change their name if they decide to do so, right? Like, how are you going a step further to support the person that identifies as trans and gender non-binary in your organization? Don't make them hustle within the same org, right? Like, organizations are supposed to be the alternatives to the already messed up systems that we have, right? So how are we making sure that these organizations are reflecting the dreams on how we want to set up our world in the future, right? And then Elizabeth was saying, there are so many beautiful trans-led organizations already, like follow their lead, follow their work, call them in, invite them in, and pay them stipends for that information and that education that they're providing to you. And then the last thing is, our lives are so intersectional, right? Like, as trans people or non-binary people, we exist in every aspect of life. And so if you are in a health care organization, how are you providing healthcare to TGNC folks, right? If you are in an organization where you do community organizing for housing, then what is it in that campaign that you're gonna focus on housing for trans folks and non-binary folks? If your organization is about immigrant rights, well, what is the area that is gonna focus on trans immigrant rights, right? In every aspect of life, there are trans people. And so how are you utilizing your resources and your positioning, your place in your organization or in the place that you work at to actually create a path for trans people and for the protection of trans people?
Gracias, Mateo. Bueno, eso resume nuestras preguntas.
Thank you, Mateo. Eso son todas nuestras preguntas. Those are all our questions. And we have 2 questions from our participants, and please feel free to respond them. And from Samantha is, safe spaces are always implemented through familial relationship. What would be the strategy as an individual to generate a safe space that can start in your home? And if you want, I can start. Please go ahead. I think it's hard. And I think the first thing I want to mention is that it's okay not having a connection with your family if you don't want to. Part of the expectation, heteronormative expectation, is that we all need to have a lot of love for our blood family and call our parents and call our grandparents. But if our family is toxic, it's toxic. If you can't have that type of connection with your family, it's okay to accept it for your own your own purpose and to be able to accept yourself. And that's okay. And if you do want to maintain that connection with your blood family, there are different programs that can support. One of the things that if you have the capacity to do is to talk to them about why it's important that your family reflect and relearn or reflect on their behavior. And if that means I've been having conversations with my family, but I'm tired of it. There are other spaces that also provide that kind of support. One of the organizations that I'm thinking about is Somos Familia, which is in San Francisco. Right now they're having virtual meetings, but what they do is it's parents, mothers and fathers of families that have virtual meetings on how they can support their children that are trans. For instance, my mother is a part of that organization. And then how can we create spaces for conversation for our own family? Anybody else want to add anything? Okay, entonces the following question is from Leanne Sanchez, is asking what resources are there for training? We talked about creating awareness, education. What resources exist for folks that want trainings around trans issues? I, I don't know if Misty or Elizabeth want to change anything, want to add anything more about the relationships around family? Go ahead, Elizabeth. Well, I just want to add a little bit around the family issue or family theme, that where there's as far as like women, trans women, as Mateo said, it's very true. The trans community, especially trans women, we experience a lot of rejection in our adolescence and even obviously as adults from our family or even from our own parents. And not only rejection, not that they don't respect us, that we're different, but it comes to a point that they're disappointed in us. And yeah, it's completely healthy not talk to your family. It's completely healthy not being in touch with your family. I personally speaking, it's been years since I haven't spoken to my family, and they live right around the corner from me. So, and that's for my own mental health, and I'm okay with it. I think I'm better because I'm being my full self, and that's not the case for everyone. There's a lot of people that might not have the strength or feel prepared to do that. And as Mateo said, there's programs, there's support systems or centers, but be you. Be you, live your life, be happy. We have fought so much throughout our lives, and s- in order to and we shouldn't stop our happiness. And with that, I want to say goodbye. Daniela Simba, thank you so much for the invitation. I have another call, so I got to get off. But thank you so much. I learned so much from you all, Misty and Mateo. It's always a pleasure to share space with you all. And so I'm leaving. Thank you so much. See you all. I hope to see you all soon. And if you're watching us, please support us, support the trans community, and please be our ally in this fight. Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. And then so the following question was what training resources exist for the trans community or to educate about the trans community?
And so if you can, hire trans people, hire non-binary people, hire gender expansive people to help you as consultants to create workshops and run workshops for your organization or for your placement, your workplace. Hire them to create a different structure to be welcoming to trans communities. And I want to make sure that it is trans people leading this work because we know what we need. And so if a cisgender person is trying to create all these workshops and do all these like structural changes, there will be moments where you will get it wrong, right? Listen to trans people and hire trans people.
Thank you. Misty, would you like to add something?
Not.
Well, veo que hay mucha gente que quiere aprender sobre los
But I
pronombres.
see a lot of people who want to learn more about pronouns who join the meeting late. And maybe we can go ahead and introduce ourselves with our name and our pronoun again. And I'm going to start again. My name is Vil Suarez. I'm from part of the Latino Commission on AIDS, and I'm open to all pronouns. I don't have a preference. Mateo? Yes, my pronouns are him and they, them.
And my name is Misty. I work at Community Healthcare Network. My pronouns are she and her.
Gracias. Si quieren dar algún gente
Thank
que quiere...
you. And if you want to give your contact info and if you want to share that around your organization, and Mateo, you said that you work for Make the Road. If someone wants to connect with you, can you please share your contact info, and Missy as well? Yeah, if you want to look for more information on Make the Road, just maketheroad.org, and there's a section that says contacts. There you can look for whatever information about the organization. And my email is mateo.guerrero@maketheroad.org. And you can send me an email with whatever question. And we're also looking for consultants. That if you're looking for consultants, there's multiple people I can refer you to. Misty?
My contact is MV as in Victor, IDAL at CHNNYC.org. I'll also write it in the chat section. But you can reach out to me. As I said, I deal with the transgender community, helping them navigate through the system and make it a little easier for them. I'm that liaison. So if you need some help, you can reach out to me there. But again, I'll write it in the comment section.
Thank you. Okay, entonces, muchísimas gracias a los panelistas.
Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you the panelists. I think all of the questions for today, if I'm not wrong. Okay, and this has been the first day of our webinar. And there's going to be another one for tomorrow on the theme of support. And Joaquin is gonna put the link in the chat in order to register, and it's going to be moderated by Joaquin. And to finish the webinar, we're gonna show a slideshow with some of the different services and events and services that different agencies are offering.
Okay, so empecemos con el Zero Transphobia.
Okay, we're going to start with Zero Transphobia. We are collecting art pieces, poetry, songs, drawings, illustrations, and you can send it to that email that was on the screen. And as I mentioned, tomorrow we're going to have the second day. We're going to talk about support.
Oh, ahí ven el correo que es Zero Transphobia.
And there you can see the email, that's zerotransphobia@latinoaids.org. Please share whatever you'd like to share with us, where we're going to be presenting it on Thursday.
Transgender Day of Remembrance.
And then we have Transgender Day of Remembrance. We're going to have a vigil on Thursday, November 19th.
Igual va a haber una virtual el día 19.
Then we're going to have a virtual one on the 19th and 20th over Zoom at from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Nuestros compañeros de Latinx Network.
Our comrade from the Latinx Network will have a virtual vigil for the Trans Day of Remembrance, where you can look into the social media for more information, but it's gonna be on Friday, November 20th from 6 to 8 p.m. We're gonna have a drag in November 20th by the Valley AIDS Council, 7 to 8:30 p.m. And there you have more information if you'd like to participate. And for those folks who want to know more about resources, we still have some here called Madre e Hijo, Mother and Child, and you can look at the Translatina Network for more information. It's going to be a workshop for immigrant mothers. We're also gonna, Trans Latinx Network is gonna have free English classes on Tuesdays from 5 to 7. Please get in touch with them in their social through their social media. And we have Trans Day of Remembrance. It's going to be led by Transgrediendo on November 20th from 6 to 8 p.m. in Queens. And we're going to have meetings of Trans Day of Remembrance, TDOR, from folks from different countries. On November 25th, we're also going to have our coordinator, Daniela Simba, that's going to be speaking around trans health. And we also have Trans Day of Remembrance. It's going to be on the 20th at 11 a.m. If you want to participate and be part of the event, here is some more information. And also with the Latino Commission, it has a project called Inspira, that works around substance abuse and anxiety and depression, and you can get in touch with you, which is part of Oasis Center. Oasis LGBT Center offers services for the trans and non-binary community. These are our information, our hours, and our webpage for different appointments. And finally, we have the program called Muerte for cis and trans women, gender fluid and non-binary folks, talking about changing your name or hormone treatment. And that's all for today. Thank you so much to the participants and the panelists. And don't forget to register for tomorrow's event. Bye.